We are sharing this on our YouTube, our LinkedIn, and our Facebook channels. And we'd love you to join in with us while we're talking and add for you some comments into the message box. Let us know what you think whilst we're having a chat. We're talking about everything around humanising the world of work. So lots of different people are still very focused on a very similar purpose that's much more socially and morally conscious of the world than ever before. And here we are today. I've got a fantastic guest, Paige Collins, joining me today. I met Paige very recently, well, probably a couple of months ago now, and I was really struck by a particular concept that she shared with me around emotional profit, and I thought she would be a fantastic guest to come and share her thoughts on that specific area. So I'm very pleased to have you here, Paige, today. Welcome. Would you like to do a little introduction, please?
Yeah. Well, hi, Alex. Thank you very much indeed for inviting me to come and have a chat with you. I'm Paige Collins from Warren House. We're a firm of chartered accountants, but in modern phraseology, I say I'm a financial engineer, because that just sounds much more engaging with what we actually try and do for our clients, because you can't change history, you can just influence the future. And I met Alex a few months ago now, and we got talking about my concept of emotional profit, and the rest is history to a certain extent. But early days.
Early days. So yes, there's definitely a book in it, isn't there, Paige? And I think it's all part of the process, getting to the point where you can actually get something formulated together. But I'm really pleased to hear your thoughts on it, particularly because of your background, as you said, kind of in accountancy, in a financial world where sometimes we focus more on the numbers than we should do, and all organisations are kind of guilty of that. But I'd love to hear a bit more. What do you mean? What do you really mean by emotional profit, and where did that come from?
Well, having worked in the world of financial profit for my whole career, effectively, and you realise that sometimes it's anachronistic, perhaps, to look at things like that. And I think if the pandemic didn't teach us anything but the fact that actually the younger generation want to be more connected to businesses. And my concept of emotional profit sprung up from a Brighton Chamber breakfast probably about 4 years ago now. And I just thought, actually, there's more to this than meets the eye. It's just my initial thoughts. But it gained a bit more traction when I was having lunch with Rosie McColl, who's head of Brighton Girls. She's an innovator for girls' education and education just generally. And she got me to read a book by Matthew Syed called Rebel Ideas. And it's about looking at things differently. And that was the sort of the switch on, if you like, of my sort of journey into emotional profit. But the thing that constrained me about the concept of emotional profit was about recording it as a number, if you know what I mean. And it just didn't seem right at all to measure a concept of emotional profit by a number. And I had a sort of eureka moment about 15 months ago or so, when I came up and it just went bing, and there it was. And I wanted to measure emotional profit by a colour or a series of colours. And the series of colours will represent the various parts of the emotional profit concept. From simply, if you're carbon positive, you'll end up with a green colour. But you start with almost just a hint of green. And when you're carbon positive, it will be a vibrant green. And the same with other aspects of the connection of emotional profit.
And that's really interesting, isn't it? Because we have a particular kind of response necessarily to kind of quantitative versus qualitative ways of looking at things. And lots of businesses are driven by numbers. They interpret the numbers. The numbers are the headline, and then you go into detail to find out what the numbers mean to tell the real story.
Yeah, and I think the whole concept of the corporate social responsibility, diversity, inclusion, there's a lot out there, but nothing brings it together to measure it in any particular way that I've come across, certainly. And I just thought, actually, a more better way to record it and manage it and enhance it by giving a colour to it and making it a visual impact for all companies. I mean, my holy grail to a certain extent is to say that companies would embrace the concept of emotional profit before they embrace the financial profit. Because I think, so the younger generation, certainly, that are less sort of binary in their approach to their sort of work ethic and how they want to connect with companies, is much more about their connection to them in a much softer way than the old-fashioned and slightly sort of binary way of financial returns. And I think a strong emotional profit will necessarily mean you have a strong financial profit, because the people will be trusted, they'll be engaged with the company and perform better.
And that's it, isn't there? Because there's enough evidence-based research now to show that that how people feel about their organization has a huge impact on the bottom line. So it's great that you've kind of that backing's there to be able to say, actually, if we do put this first rather than the profit pieces, there could be an impact. And also, we're at an interesting time for organizations globally. With the kind of headline, it's moved on from corporate social responsibility to ESG now, hasn't it? You know, and governance kind of aspect of things. But even still, that sounds a little bit official, doesn't it? And a bit too kind of governance focused. And I don't know how much it really taps into how people feel. But people are looking for frameworks for ESG, you know, and this is essentially what you're talking about. Is a framework.
Society has a framework. I mean, we all work within frameworks, but there's nothing that sort of brings it together in a connected way that people can understand easily. And I just thought the whole concept of, you know, colour to recording and monitoring and managing that sort of process made it a much more sort of tangible, visual thing for people to engage with. You know, at Brighton Chamber with one of the talks with Mike Adams, who talked about the Purple Pound, which is about disability and the inclusion with disability. And I think he was saying that the disability sort of framework, if you like, the people involved in disability world, if you like, is worth £276 million a year. So we all need to just embrace more of these things. So, you know, if you're doing something for an inclusion with disability, then that would be measured by a purple colour, because he has that as a purple colour. That's his organisation sort of thing. And I think the thing that brought it home to me at the Chamber convention was the fact that his daughter, when she was learning to use a stylus for her iPhone, because he has disability, she used it and put it in her mouth, because that's how he used it, because that's how he has to use it. And how powerful a tool is that to understanding the concept of disability and the difference that can make.
Yeah, while you're talking, I'm thinking of lots of different aspects of that, true, because as you said, you know, Generation Z, millennials are much more aware of diversity and hold it in much, I guess, a higher value in terms of the organizations they want to work with and work for. And we know that a lot of people nowadays have more trust in business leaders than they do in the media or the government, because actually they're more connected to what organizations can do to impact people and planet. And so there's quite a swell, isn't there, of need for something like this. And I've kind of been I love Brighton for its wonderful inclusive culture. That's one of the reasons we chose Spain and French to set up there as our core. And I've been exploring this concept of uniqueness, which is much more of a positive kind of focus on diversity than almost like diversity management or inclusion programs. Is more about celebrating the uniqueness of everyone, far beyond protected characteristics, which a lot of people seem quite hung up on. It's kind of like what's the combination of life experiences that make us completely unique, but that taps into all those pieces and brings it to the forefront and gives people that equal opportunity. And I love the fact of taking it through to colours also moves it away from language descriptors to a certain extent. So one of the things I worry about often, particularly in the world of psychology, is the language labels that are given to things and types and descriptors that end up labeling people, but they come from a particular demographic, and actually not always people feel like they actually represent them as a human being, and that worries me.
That's often the case. I mean, I obviously am part of the LGBT community, AQI+, etc., but I sort of almost don't feel part of that. Not for any particular reason, other than I'm just very fortunate to have a very supportive family and friends that have been helping me on my journey, and that's just the way it is. But to put a label on me, I don't feel is quite appropriate. But other people would need a label.
It becomes you then, doesn't it? Rather than it being part of your rich kind of fabric of a human uniqueness. And I think that's kind of where I'm trying to get to, is that kind of how do we get to the human uniqueness point that's really positive and really supportive, and it actually feels like it's valuable to people and teams and organizations in that way. And I wonder whether this emotional profit piece could actually bring that more to the forefront, and the use of color particularly. I find that really interesting, because there's some other kind of psychometric tests out there, personality tests that use colors. but actually they almost dumb down some of the I guess the intricate ways of understanding personality from a psychologist's perspective, and yet what you're talking about here is almost like a release of that. It's like being able to look beyond those descriptors and labels, to use those colors to represent different aspects of.
And also some part of the color thing is that certain colors represent certain things, and should they?
Yeah,
just because they historically have shouldn't mean they should be different colors to different people.
Exactly. So they already mean the label, right?
Yes, and it's trying to get around the construct and social construct of a label for a color. And I was a bit cliche by saying, green is being the carbon neutralness, but it could be a different color altogether. But also, you have to go back to people feel comfortable if certain things are in a sort of a box of a color, because they understand what that might mean.
Yes, and make a closer association with it. So
I'm no artist, and my initial concept was take all the colours that there might be, and I was thinking very much along the sort of Chivalry Pursuit lines, or sort of widget you'd have, and you might have 7 or 8 of those, and mix all the colours together, and you have a fantastic colour out at the end of it. Unfortunately, I was told by an artist friend of mine that it actually ends up being a dirty brown colour.
It does, yeah.
You learn something new every day, and that's just the way it is.
Brilliant. So what next then for the emotional profit framework and kind of idea? How could you bring this to life in a way that organizational leaders and can go, do you know what, actually we really need that, and I'd like to use that to represent what's going on, everything we're focusing on right now? Yeah,
I mean, it's a question of me actually having a bit of time, having set up my own practice literally 17 months ago. I'm spending obviously time to make sure me and the team are all connected with that, and we're growing as we are growing and evolving that business. I need a bit of me time to sit down and put some flesh on the bones, if you like, my concepts and things like that, and then I can write the book.
Yeah. And so who would it be aimed at in terms of audience? Who would be the people that would pick this and go, we need to do this in our organization?
Well, I think it's not going to be the current business leaders, because I think they are stuck in the old-fashioned ways of not trusting anybody and things like that. Whereas I think much more, if you trust people, they'll trust you back. We as an organisation, we don't do timesheets. I said to my team when we first started the business, I said, we all trust each other. We know what we've got to do done for our clients. We don't need timesheets to record that. And they were all a refreshing change. And like that idea to a certain extent. Some people felt a bit uncomfortable with it to a certain extent because they'd always done timesheets historically. But then I was talking to a guest at a friend's wedding, and they were in the marketing side of things, and they had a new CFO come and join them, and the first thing they did was brought in timesheets for the marketing team so they could understand what they were doing. And they all felt it was a constraint to doing good business, effectively.
I agree. I haven't been part of an organisation using timesheets for a very long time, but I do remember it. And I almost wonder why did we bring that in? It's a very industrial era kind of focus, isn't it? The legacy thing that's kind of stayed with organisations.
I mean, there's a lot of things that have been going on post-war that we still continue to do, and is it actually really fit for purpose? And I think the pandemic should have been that moment in time where we all reflected on things and said, actually, that's not the right way to be doing it, or we should challenge, not in any sort of rebel way, but just in a constructive way, and say, are we still doing the right thing? And the whole concept of emotional profit fits into that from my perspective.
Yes, it does. Timing is really important. There is definitely a window here at the moment, isn't there? And it's interesting because it's about 6 months before the pandemic, I was talking a lot about kind of humanizing work and what that really meant. In the essence that actually it felt like organizations were losing their human touch almost. It felt like people were kind of coming to a point of almost like switching their human off before they go to work in order to get through work. And yet, and here we are through the pandemic. And exactly as you said, it seems to have woken up lots of people, lots of leaders, lots of organizations to do things differently through force. And because, so much meant that we had to change very quickly. But what we've learned through that, and then now coming out into an uncertain economic forecast, we're all in that kind of change state still, aren't we? The ones that have kind of had
to capture the moment, because if we don't capture the moment, we'll be going back. And I've heard a number of times people saying, "I want to get everybody back to the office," and that's just an anachronistic way of looking at the working environment.
It's really hard, because in some businesses, yes, that is not required, but in others it is, and some don't even have the choice because their roles don't allow that.
No,
And
but also if you're learning or if you're growing up, the first part of your career, you need to engage with people. So there is the mechanics to be in the office and to learn from those around you. But I'm sure there must be ways, and I'm sure, technology is great. And I mean, I've had Zoom meetings in 10 different countries around the world, which wouldn't have ever happened pre-pandemic. And thank goodness for that. So we should embrace the technology. We should be connected on a regular basis. And if I have team members that are working from home, I try and speak to them on a daily basis to show that they're still connected as part of the team.
How big is your team now, Paige?
Well, we have 12 people, 9 full-time equivalents.
Yeah. And that's quite a bit in terms of keeping that connectedness and that belonging there too. And so, do you think you'll use this emotional profit piece with your team first? Will you try it out for yourself? Have you already started down that journey?
I've sort of started in part the concept and how that might be engaged. We're early days as a size of organisation to embrace some of these things, but there's so much out there. We've done work with the David Children's Charity from a sort of a connection point of view, from a charity point of view. We have flexible working from home. One of the team members wanted to move to Bristol and didn't want to and wanted to stay connected with the team, and we've made that work, and that's great. You don't have to be constrained just because old-fashioned way of working will constrain you by your geographic location. There's no reason to be geographically constrained this day and age, and that's just, again, part of that emotional sort of profit from team engagement.
And how did that feel? How did that feel in terms of creating more of that emotional profit? Do you feel like that boosted the team?
Yes, I think the team are very supportive of that concept of it. They're aware of my concept of emotional profit, but we don't, because it hasn't got traction yet in terms of the colours and the things that make it up. But that's work in progress, and I want to make sure we've got a disability clause, and we have accessibility for any disabled person, so we can engage with that community. Now, that's work in progress, because that's just the way it is at the moment. Larger organisations have done this already, and so they'd have a very strong purple colour. Maybe that's the disability colour. Ours is a bit lighter at the moment, as we're working in progress to improve these things.
And I think that's the thing, isn't it? Constantly learning and looking to see what we can do to make things better for our own people as we grow and move on. And so we've come to the end of our time, Paige. It went super quickly, right? So I'm really pleased to be able to have you on as a guest to talk about the emotional profit piece. And I think it really is an indication of kind of thinking differently about humanising the world of work. And I love that, the visual piece as well. And because it is so connected to us as human beings, like we don't need everything to be structured in a particular way just because it's always been that way. And I love that kind of that opportunity. And I look forward to reading the book, Paige, when you have some time to sit down and write down all the thoughts.
I shall let you have a signed copy when I've done it, Alex.
Fantastic. But yes, I really thank you so much for coming in today and sharing your piece with us, and I hope that we can stay connected and have you on as a guest again. But thank you everyone for joining us today. As I said previously, on our LinkedIn, our YouTube and our Facebook channels, do pop in your comments and messages here, and we will definitely respond to all of those as soon as they come through. But thank you so much for your time today, and we look forward to our next LinkedIn Live, Humanising the World of Work with Damien French. So thank you very much, Paige, and thank you everyone for listening.